everyone. This is Stephanie Krubzak with the Purevant Living Women in Wellness podcast. With me today, we have Keller Fitzsimmons, co-founder of CRS, a virtual reality production company, author of Lost in Startuplandia, Wayfinding for the Weary Entrepreneur. Her work has been featured in Network Computing, Information Week, and Inc. magazine. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
So let's get started with how did we meet?
So you remember meeting me earlier than I remember meeting you, which was at the Women's Week Entrepreneurship Conference last year. I did the keynote kickoff, and so that week is a blur to me. So I apologize sincerely. But then we got back together with Manny, who introduced us, and we had a chance to have coffee.
Yeah, definitely. So that was a great event, by the way. So I got to hear you speak and talk about your book.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was so wonderful. I mean, for me, being a technology entrepreneur, to be in a room that's exclusively women or mostly women is such a rarity. I've been at major conferences, like conferences where there's over 50,000 people attending, and I've stood in the bathroom, in the women's bathroom, just waiting for another woman to show up, just waiting. And sometimes it would be 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, so women in my field, up until very, very recently were dramatically underrepresented, and truly we still are today.
Mm-hmm, definitely. So tell us a little bit more about your role as an entrepreneur.
Wow. So I started as an entrepreneur at the tender age of 25. I had been working for a bulletin board system, and this is what predates really the World Wide Web. And I had been asked to join this company and was working as a culture and arts editor. And a BBS is essentially like, it's like a very early prototype of a website and web community. Think of Prodigy, AOL. This one was Wisconsin-based and had a great name, Vortex Integrated Systems. And it really sums up how it all went down, too. It was just a swirling mess of mismanagement, and eventually Vortex sucked itself into non-existence. And so my first job in the startup world was with this company, and I thought, okay, I can do this. And so basically my original business plan was to think what would the founder of Vortex do, and then I would just do the opposite. And that was Sun Tzu Security, which turned out to be one of my most successful companies.
That's really great. Do you want to talk a little bit more about CSR or CRS? Sorry.
Sure. So CRS was founded in 2015, and the whole vision for it really was coming together of two really great ideas, which is one, virtual reality allows us to take first-person experiences and really scale it. And my husband, Jeff, and I had gotten very early involved in VR because of Kickstarter. My husband was one of the original Kickstarter participants for the Oculus Rift. So we had Developer Kit 1 delivered onto our doorstep in September of 2012. And so we were pretty much off to the races because he was just so into it. And we were coming off another startup. My health was in a really bad place, and so it was great to see Jeff tinkering and occupied and excited about something. But what made us really different is that we partnered with Brad Lichtenstein, and Brad is a 20-plus year documentary filmmaker who specializes in social justice. And so combining virtual reality and social justice was what really made us unique. And our first two big projects across the line in 2016 and most recently Ash 68, both premiered at Sundance, have had really wonderful reception worldwide, and we feel like made a difference in terms of telling stories, unique stories that put people into other people's shoes and allowed them to walk a mile in it. And that's what really excites me about the virtual reality work that we've done to date.
That's really great. And I know that you've started 6 technology startups in 3 different industries, and you're part of only 2% of female founders with venture capital backing. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that is? And I know that's such a small percentage of women.
Truly, and it's not because we are outshadowed in terms of the numbers of startups that we found. It really does have to do with bias, implicit bias, and it's really maddening. I've been involved with Springboard Enterprises, since 2008. And they keep the numbers. So Springboard today is over 700 companies that are women-led, all falling into tech, media, life sciences. And it was started almost 20 years ago by two good friends of mine, Kate Koplovitz, who is from Wisconsin, from South Milwaukee, and Amy Millman. And they started Springboard to showcase women entrepreneurs and founders because the VCs were saying there's no women deals. We don't see it. And they're like, okay, there's tons of deals. Let's show you. We'll show you the best. And so since the kickoff, they've had this extraordinary funding rate. To date, we have raised collectively over $20 billion. We've had, I think, 20 IPOs now. So everything from Constant Contact to iRobot to most recently The Real Real are all Springboard companies. And so there are great deals out there. There are great women entrepreneurs. There's founders. But unfortunately, that has not really changed the amount of companies, percentage-wise, that are getting funded. So unfortunately, we're still dealing with a lot of bias in the space. And, women just, it's nothing new to anybody who's a female listening to this. We just have to work a lot harder. And hopefully we get lucky and get noticed and get the capital we need to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some of the other initiatives that you're working on?
So right now, one of the things that's occupying most of my time, other than touring with the book, has been Backline, which was an organization that was founded in a collaboration between Generator here in Milwaukee and 88.9 Radio Milwaukee. And the idea is to help local musicians break nationally, so to help establish Milwaukee and Wisconsin as a place and a hub for music. And we've had 3 cohorts go through the program so far. Getting into Backline is extremely hard. We only have 3 slots each cohort, and we'll have anywhere between 300 to 400 people apply. So getting in is actually harder to get into Backline than it is to get into Harvard.
Wow.
And so early on, I was approached as a donor, and I said I love the idea. My big concern is when we're helping people break nationally, I don't want them to break as people. Mm-hmm. And so often we see these horrible headlines of artists really succumbing to addiction and suicide, and it's a pretty messy picture from a wellness perspective. And as the daughter of an artist, I felt called to step in and try to make a difference. And I didn't really know how or what that would look like. And thankfully, I was asked to participate, and they said, why don't you create a curriculum? And I said, okay. So I took all of the stuff that I'd learned over 20 years of being on the recipient side of executive coaching and working with different coaches over the years, as well as the Center for Authentic Leadership out of Atlanta. It created this program that was really designed to help the artists support themselves and also create community for the artists of people who had no agenda other than their own personal welfare and success. So it's like artists helping artists. I can help for that 10-week program and I can be there for the alums, but we're already at 13. And, in a couple of years, that'll be 26 and, eventually 100. And that's a lot of people. I can't do it all by myself. We really need to have this community of artists that are intertwined and interdependent and helping each other, walk the hard walk of putting your vulnerability and your art out into the world and catching each other when things don't go right, or our lives don't go right. And I don't think we can have a successful ecosystem for music in Wisconsin if we don't have a healthy ecosystem for the artists to work within. And so that's really my larger, higher intention with this, is to help create a system of almost, for lack of better words, like checks and balances, a community that catches and holds each other up.
So I know you introduced me to Barbara, who is on the theme song for this podcast.
Yeah, so Barbara Steffen is an amazing musician. She's a classically trained jazz musician. She's a vocal coach for like 18 years. I'm just so gifted, and I have the good fortune of being a collaborator with her. So she's my co-writer on the 2 songs that we performed at Creative Mornings on last Friday with me.
It's amazing. I teared up, actually.
Thank you.
It was so good.
I really appreciate it. It was an extraordinary experience to put my own music out into the world for the first time. And I really couldn't have done it without Barbara's support and giftedness. She is just really a dream to work with. And also one of the kindest people I've ever met, just really has a heart of gold. And when you're starting out making music, you need somebody there to be willing to give you the emotional support and help your ideas like surface. Because it's, I've worked with a lot of other folks, and at a certain point I'm like, I have no idea where my part is, where their part is, and is this more them than me? And those are all the wrong questions. I really learned in working with Barbara. It's like, the fact is, music, like most art, is a collaborative process. And when you work with people that really resonate with you, it's like the end product just gets so elevated, and it's not really about authorship. It's really about community.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about Lost in Startuplandia?
Yeah, so I wrote the book for me, essentially. It was an act of sense making. And it was also wishing that if I could go back in time and if there was a book that was available for me at 29, that this would have been there. When I was 29, the .com crash hit. And it was so harsh. My second startup failed, and I had written a series of personal guarantees, and I was on the hook for $5 million. And I had a condo, so I had like $50,000 in equity, so I was totally set. No, it was horrifying. And I spent the next 3 years, hiding that debt and hiding the fact that this had happened to me. And so it was not part of my public persona. Nobody really knew the story except for like 2 people. And it was crushing because for me, it was a real moral injury to be presenting myself in the world like everything's fine when I knew it wasn't fine, which is just a lie. And living that lie for 3 years really impacted my mental wellness. And I got really sick, very, very depressed, and I was dealing with suicidal ideation. So yeah, that was something.
Resonating with your story, there's so many bits and pieces of your personal life I'm sure readers can connect to on a personal level.
Yeah, I hope so. And it wasn't really designed to tell my story per se. I mean, part of it was like just sense making, but the other piece was to pull in other people, like Chip Connolly and Julie Wainwright and, other entrepreneurs who had suffered pretty dramatically in the entrepreneurship race, and very personally too. And so trying to make it a tale that's available to everyone, and it's not really about me. I'm more like what's the word I'm looking for? I decided to deconstruct my persona and my success bio and my success narrative so that other entrepreneurs could see the actuality of it. That if you just looked and read my full bio, I sound like I'm, all turned out, and that's not true. It's a very cropped picture of my life. It's only the tiny little bits of the peaks of the mountain, and it doesn't give you a sense of what it took for me to get there, but it also doesn't give you a sense of all the amount of failure I had to endure to be there. And I think that's a dangerous picture to paint for young entrepreneurs, because I had no sense that anybody else had ever failed like I had. I just thought I was the biggest idiot in the world for getting myself into that hot mess, not realizing that catastrophic failure, a failure of a business where you're letting go people that you care about and you're on the hook financially to debt that you can't even fathom, is more often a reality than not for entrepreneurs. And I think that the media's narrative of, it's like, you want to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is great. Let's open another school for entrepreneurship. It's like, this is not the path for most people. And I'm not even sure it's the right path for me, having done it 6 times. Because it's really, really hard. But we do a disservice to people's mental wellness when we don't talk about how hard it is, and we only talk about the upside and the good stuff and the peaks and not the valleys.
Definitely agree with that. When you're in it, it's tough. You're cutting a lot of personal time to make the company float. So,
well, and that's one piece of it for sure. It's like, and as you get older, that not just that personal time, it's like it becomes family time. Like if, for me, I had small children, I had babies. When we took on venture capital, I had one that was 18 months and one that was just brand new born. I left the hospital and went to Chicago to sign the paperwork.
Oh my gosh.
And I had to have a C-section. Like I signed the paperwork 3 days after a C-section. So it's like those kind of choices, having to have not just one, but like 2 nannies, like trying to make it all work. My husband's my co-founder. So time is a piece of it, but also the sacrifice of connection and relationship and intimacy. And I often think that entrepreneurship is a great way for us that are afraid of intimacy. No one have to worry. We've got this higher purpose. We're out in the world. We're making things happen. We never have to connect with another human being. And we can keep it all surface. And for me, for a good decade, it's pretty much what I did.
Yeah, and that can only last for so long, right?
Oh yeah, that show's
you
gonna
desire
end.
that personal connection, and yeah.
Well, and for some, sadly, it doesn't. There's a lot of people who are lauded as great success stories that they're on their 6th marriage. Their kids don't talk to them. They might have all the wealth in the world and a great business narrative, but their personal life is in shambles. And I feel like that's another piece of the story that's not told. Who do we hold up as successful? It's really important because I would argue that is not success. If you are, a successful business person and a failed human being, what's more important?
That's very true. Kind of a more well-rounded. So maybe your business isn't double the size, but you have like a healthy relationship with people in your life.
Your kids talk to you. You're able to withstand, the pressures of a marriage and a business, or, that you make time for friends and family. And those are the things that tend to get cut out because it's easy. Who's gonna, oh, I'm so busy, and your parents like, oh, I understand, sweetie, and then they die. And that's what happens. And we don't realize it when we're young. We think that our parents are going to be there, or our sisters or brothers. And for me to have, my mom and my sister pass away within 6 months of each other was just rocked my world. So you start to look around and you realize everybody's got an expiration date. And if you're not putting that piece of information into the calculus of how you spend your time, you're doing a huge disservice, not to yourself, but to your family and to those that you love. And, nobody remembers how hard you work on your deathbed. You just don't. And it really took me to getting as sick as I got, and to being there and then looking out the window and thinking, oh my gosh, I've got this great CV, but I haven't done my stuff yet. And my stuff was really my art, and being willing to step into the vulnerability and bravery to create music and art in a public way for the first time.
I think that's a very powerful and important message for everybody to hear, to prioritize family and your passions. And I know you touched upon this already about different life events you went through, but is there a specific event or experience that on your personal journey that led you to where you are today?
Oh, for sure. So I sort of hinted at it. So I lost my mom and my sister within 6 months of each other. And then 60 days later, I opened up my laptop and I could no longer make sense of the symbols. I had lost my ability to read. And I have dyslexia, so my relationship with reading comprehension has always been a little tentative. But to have it just go out and not be able to trust what I read, it was like autocomplete. But everybody does this. You'll be reading a book and all of a sudden you kind of drift and you've gone 5 pages and you're in a totally different novel, right? It's like not what's on the page. But that was how it was all the time for me. And so I couldn't trust my reading. Like it wasn't lining up. I could read the same article 3 times and have 3 different articles. So it required that I stop all work. And what I didn't know at the time was I had a brain injury. And it was brought on by black mold in our house, also known toxic mold. And it's such an underreported story, but it's so common. And there's about 22% of the population that has a similar genotype to me that actually can't get it out of our systems. Our liver, our filtration system doesn't recognize it as a foreign body. And so it builds up to the place where it becomes neurotoxic.
Wow.
And and so I was just laying in bed. I was getting terrible migraines and couldn't work. And so my go-to thing when things are hard is to work, right? So I couldn't do anything. So I'm sitting here dealing with grief and I can't work myself out of it, which was the best thing that could possibly happen to me. It was there that I ended up dictating the book that would become Lost in Startuplandia, trying to make sense of the tools that I'd cobbled together to help keep myself sane in that crazy work environment. But it was also an opportunity for me to start humming and singing into my voice memos app and finally stepping into the bravery, because I had nothing to lose at this point. Everything had been taken away. So what was I going to do? I started to make music. And I think there's such a primal urge, and it increases as we age, to create things, to make things. And I'd always used my creativity and artistry in business. But that wasn't really the right medium for me. Even though I'm very successful at it and I've been able to generate a good bit of wealth, I would argue that as far as my creative endeavors go, it probably would have been better served had I kept more of an artistic lens on things. But, that was not my path. I chose differently because I was so scared of having my ego crushed by putting my art into the world and having nobody like my art. And so it's easier, weirdly, to stand behind a startup, a technology startup, where I'm one of the few females that's out there doing this. And from day one, I was being asked to be on boards and lauded as a visionary. I mean, it was great ego fodder. And when the businesses even failed, I could make the argument that I didn't fail. The business failed. It was the dot-com crash. Everybody got crushed. But that wasn't real. That wasn't true. It was an aspect of the story, but the reason why the business failed had a lot to do with the decisions I'd made. And so coming full circle now, and I'm in a place where I so much more want to be of service to other human beings. I want to help, be a stand for mental wellness, particularly with entrepreneurs and musicians, and to walk my talk, not just to talk it anymore. I'm so tired of hearing myself even talk about these things. And that was one of the reasons why I did the Creative Mornings presentation of just, I wanted to show courage. I didn't want to talk about courage anymore, because talking about courage may be a little inspiring, but showing courage, doing something that genuinely terrifies you, that's much more motivational and helpful. And at least that is for me. And that was why I chose to take that tact.
And I could tell you were definitely in your element up there on stage singing, and it was great. Everybody could see that. You were just shining.
Thank you.
So, in the song, Shine.
Yeah, exactly.
Very fitting. But as a creative, too, I definitely understand that when you're with a company, you can almost hide behind that. But when you're showing something that you've creatively made, whether it's, music or a work of art or even writing, it's very, very vulnerable. You're just exposing everything that you're thinking, and
For me, when I was writing the book, a couple of the early drafts, I was like, oh, I look too good. That's not real. I sound really too smart. So I started going back and interviewing people. I'm like, okay, just remind me how this went down. And so I had to rewrite a lot of sections of the book because I wanted to be authentic as I could, as real as I could, which meant I had to throw myself under the bus a lot. And so it was a real ego deconstruction project for me, to get out of the thing of like, oh my gosh, this makes me look so bad. Okay, put that one down, because that's most likely closer to the truth. And I feel like with truth, you can never get there. You can only approximate it. And so we do the best we can. And that was my hope, was that my humanness would come through. And that it wouldn't land like another ego project, which so many of these business books really are. It's like, here's how I made my millions, and you can too, and these 5 guaranteed steps. And it's just like, I want to just scream. I'm like, you're hurting people, stop it. And so for me, this was more of a okay, let's make sure they see the human. Let's make sure that they get that they're not alone. And if they think they're the biggest idiot in the world, you can prove them wrong right here, right here, the idiot. So yeah. And now today, my big hope is that the book has its own life, and I can step out of doing book promotion and let it live on its own as its own artifact. And I can step off the soapbox of being the queen of failure, which I've been doing for about 8 months. And it's one of the worst jobs I've ever had, but also one of the best. I get to talk to entrepreneurs and meet them where they're at, and hopefully at the end of the day, just encourage them to keep on going.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely not easy, but any encouragement helps.
It does.
And I know you did touch upon this a bit earlier too, but what are some of your short-term and long-term goals to help wellness and women overall?
My focus right now is really specific to 2 prongs. One, people in the music industry, so artists specifically, and I'm really concentrating on musicians right now because that's where my gifts lie and what I understand in terms of art forms better than others. And you have to focus. Like, that's one of the hardest pieces. It's like you can't eat the whole world, and the world's full of problems. So the thing that I love about working with artists and musicians around mental wellness is that when they're well, it comes through in their music, it comes through in their art, and it makes us all feel better. So it's something that scales. A great song can change your mood. A great song can change your outlook on life. A great song can save your life. And that's why the focus for me is there with these artists, because we have to start with their wellness first, or other they can't vibrate at that level. And when they do vibrate at that level, we all feel it. We just can't say what it is. It's this mystical sort of thing. The other way is through investment, and how I put my wealth into action, which is investing in women-led startups. I do that through Bell Capital USA. And I've been an LP since the beginning. The founder of it, the general partner, Lauren Flanagan, was my board chair at Harkin and, was my first investor. She was the one I went to see in Chicago when Riley was born to get our first round closed. And I really believe in paying it forward and making sure that I'm constantly walking my walk. If I'm saying I support women entrepreneurs, I can't just say that with words. I need to do more. So that's part of my financial commitment. The other piece is, outside of that, I do, occasionally individually invest as an angel. I had just had my first IPO. I'm so excited, which was the Real with Julie. I could have been in Series A. I mean, I was there from when she started and got to see like the first warehouse with all the haute couture in this really awful neighborhood in San Francisco. And my mom and I were part of the original, basically gave, a close to the project. And it was like Paula Abdul and this heiress out of New York. It was pretty insane, to go back to the beginning. But now there's an IPO and the company is doing really well. And to be able to see one of my investments go full circle is really exciting. And I just actually had another one, 13 years old, another one that I did outside of Bell that's just selling. I can't say that one out loud yet because the transaction's not closed, but I'm getting all my money back, which is fabulous. 13 years later, but hey. Well, yeah. So those are 2 recent wins. But what I'm putting out there is, even if you don't have a lot of money, you can still invest in women-led companies. You can do it through your stock portfolio. You can do it through, smaller amounts, Kickstarter. Just be real conscientious that we help each other. And we help each other succeed. And it's not just through words of kindness and acts of showing up for friends. You can do it with your wallet too.
That's a very good point. So what does wellness mean to you?
So that's changed over the years. Wellness for me today means that I can think. I actually, with my health issues, I have celiac and I have Hashimoto's. I have 2 autoimmune disorders. So if my health goes just a little sideways, meaning I go out to a restaurant and I get some cross-contamination of gluten, I'm out for 3 days with migraines and flu-like symptoms. It's really severe.
That's bad.
So wellness for me is like really prioritizing my health, and it means I eat at 4 restaurants in town. It means I do a ton of cooking. But it also means that I fast. I do intermittent fasting, and I will go to the desert twice a year for 8 days and fast. Part of the reason is now there's really good scientific research on it, which I knew anecdotally, was that it can reset my immune system, and I can use it in lieu of doing something like prednisone, where I can lower my inflammation. And dealing with chronic inflammation means that some days I wake up and I can't think. I can't focus. I can't do much of anything. And it's very hard for me to admit that. I'd say about 20% of my week is productive. But the 20% that I'm able to put forward, I'm like laser focused on. The rest of it, I'm just trying to get myself to a baseline of energy and quote unquote mental clarity, that I don't forget conversations. I don't, drop balls, and all of those things still happen, but I'm very proud of how rigorous I've gotten with my health so that I can maintain the balance that I've got. But I always have to be on it. I have to be incredibly vigilant.
Is there a specific wellness ritual that you do daily or weekly that you would encourage others to incorporate?
I really do think that intermittent fasting is a pretty wonderful thing, which is basically I restrict my meals to noon to 8 o'clock, and then I let my system rest. There's a lot of energy that we use just in digestion. It's a great technique for weight loss if you want that. For me, that's not my goal. My goal is really just to let the inflammation in my system go down, and even foods that I'm not necessarily triggered by can cause inflammation. I'll notice it because my rings won't work, or can't get them on, or suddenly I'll just feel off. So, we're finding out a lot about chronic inflammation, and almost all women over 40 deal with some element of this. And it ultimately leads to things like arthritis and, our joints not working. So taking a daily approach to do just one thing, whether it's, and I do this too, trying to up my green content, making sure I'm getting plenty of greens. And I'm like the queen of smoothies, sneaking spinach into my diet. But it's really all about, for me, just being able to be present and not in bed. And that's really where I'm at. Where if somebody else had my diet and did the supplement routine and did the intermittent fast, they would be ready to run a marathon. But that's just my baseline.
What is your smoothie recipe, if you won't mind sharing?
Sure. So there is a really wonderful, what is it? It's Metagenics, GI Sustain. I get it from my doctor, Dr. Schwartz, here in Milwaukee. Basically it's a basis for a smoothie that's really around gut support, and that's what I need. So helping to support the probiotic, not just probiotic, but it's in this particular blend, it's prebiotic, a lot of prebiotic stuff. And I add a banana, I add almond milk is big for me. I also will switch it off because I always am rotating through milks, so they don't get over on anything. Which I highly recommend for everybody. So that'll be almond milk, or I'll switch to coconut milk. And then I add raw cacao, ton of spinach. I have this thing called, it's a type of trace minerals, because getting a lot of the trace minerals is really hard. I get it through We Care Spa. And then a lot of collagen. I add a ton of collagen into it. And it doesn't sound good on any level, but that smoothie rocks. And I don't have to add any sweetness to it. The banana really takes care of it. And the Metagenics GI Sustain has surprisingly got enough sweetness to it. And it tastes like a pretty darn good chocolate shake. And that is my go-to recipe, I'd say about 3 days a week.
Sounds really good. I think we should all try it. So what is your personal mantra or theme song that kind of gets you into a good state of mind to start your day or redirects your mindset?
It's great. I mean, so it changes. I listen to a lot of new music. I believe that people tend to lock in musically around 21 to 23, and then like that's it. And as you get older, you'll start to notice friends are like just all they listen to is their like favorite like list from high school or college. And I believe that it's really bad for our brains. Like our brains need diversity. So I don't have one song. I have many songs, but right now I'm really listening to a lot of Cat Power. I love her song Woman. And in the morning, when the girls are getting up, we have a lot of disagreement about music in the household. Not that I don't like their music. I think they've got great musical taste, but they tend to get really down on mine, which is hilarious because it's basically the same. But it's just, Mom, don't listen to my music. So that song gets past my sensors every morning, and I just love her voice. And I don't know if you've heard this song, but there's something about her collaboration with Lana Del Rey in it, where it's these two very different vocal artists sharing their voice around such a common female experience, and how important it is for us to see each other as we are and to have each other's back, particularly when women get into bad relationships. And too often we just get irritated because our friends are just complaining about whoever again and again and again. Question is, are we willing to step in and be a truth teller and get out of our annoyance and stand up and say, you're hurting yourself. It's time to move on. And I would love that to be more of the common female interactions than we see. But right now, particularly in Wisconsin, we go for the nice and we do lies of omission. We're like, oh, he sounds wonderful. Yay. Oh, it's so good he's not beating you anymore. I mean, that's really how bad it is. Instead of standing up and be like, you're going to move in to my house for the next week and you are never seeing him again. I love you. And this is what I'm going to take a stand for. But that's just unfortunate where we're at in terms of female communication. It's not where it needs to be.
They say that your meanest friend is the friend that cares about you the most, right?
I love that. I think it takes a lot of courage to have mean friends. Some of my, and quote unquote mean friends, right? Like some of my favorite people in my life scare the hell out of me. They do, because they are willing to say the thing that nobody else will tell me. And they actually have a hard time keeping friends, right? People don't go, oh my gosh, so-and-so hurt my feelings. I'm like, because you needed to hear that. It might not have been delivered well, but those truth tellers are vital to our self-awareness. Without them, we're flying blind. But again, it's part of the culture of femaleness. Oh, the mean girls will just say, well, we just don't talk to so-and-so and then we'll all gossip about her. And it's like, nope, that is my best friend. My best friends are some of the, I would say, cutting, incisive people you'll ever meet. And for a reason, I know they don't pull punches. And if I'm screwing up, I'll hear about it.
Yeah, I think it's great too. It's needed. So, but to be able to take that because it's coming from a place of, their compassion. They care about you. So,
and it might not always be.
Maybe not. That is true.
Maybe not. I mean, there are just genuine mean girls in the world that are there to cut you down, and that's not what this is about. This is more about saying, hey, do you realize you're over talking or you're dominating the conversation? That may hurt your feelings, but it's probably true.
Yeah.
And the more you're hurt by it, the more likely it's very true.
Great point. So how can listeners reach you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to reach me. You can friend me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and and I also do some Twitter. I'm trying to cut back a bit on my social media, so if I don't respond immediately, it is not personal. I'm really focusing on a new project, and until that one is done, I'm like declining a lot of requests for coffee and such. But there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. I will be back.
Well, thank you again so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure hearing about your journey. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was great talking with you.
I look into your eyes.